Good morning and welcome to Webinar Tuesday with SBA. We have collaborated to bring this series of webinars to you to help VI small business owners to further connect and benefit from the SBA Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands District Office and from all that they have to offer. Just a friendly reminder, put your questions in the chat and they will be addressed at the end of the presentation. My name is Mary Jo Williams, and I'm a business advisor at the Small Business Development Center. Our presenter today is Mr. Wayne Huddleston. He's the Senior Area Manager of the Virgin Islands SBA. And at this point, I will give Wayne the floor, and Wayne, you can further introduce yourself. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Mary Jo. Thank you to you and SBDC for hosting this morning. Again, my name is Wayne Huddleston. I'm the Senior Area Manager for SBA here in the territory. I'm also joined by my colleague, Lisa Shamliaki. She is on St. Thomas. She is also part of the SBA team, and she will be assisting in this presentation as well. As many of you know, every week, the SBDC hosts SBA on Tuesdays to provide information on an SBA topic. And this week we were asked to talk about preparing for disasters and how SBA is involved in assisting businesses and homeowners after a disaster. So fortunately right now, it being December, we are not in the middle of the prime time that all of us are on guard for disasters during hurricane season. But that being said, disaster really has a number of various forms, not just bad weather. It can be a fire. It can be, of course, a pandemic. We're still technically in a presidentially declared disaster right now during the pandemic, although right now we're starting to accept that as a new normal for life. And with the vaccines getting more prevalent out there, perhaps the effects of it will abate some, hopefully. But disasters of all different kinds strike at different times. So we want to have a presentation to talk about how to prepare your business for recovery from a disaster and to lessen the impacts when it happens. So let's see if I can advance the slides. Here we go. So in this presentation, we're going to basically talk about those two areas. One, how to prepare in advance for disaster. I know that's very tough sometimes because a lot of times we don't know what's coming. So if we knew what was coming in advance, it'd be a lot easier. But no one really foresaw a pandemic. You know, all sorts of things can happen. So, but there are things you can do regardless of what happens to better prepare yourself for recovery when that disaster happens. And then we're going to talk about that recovery process and the tools that are available to small business owners afterwards. So as I mentioned here in the Virgin Islands, of course, hurricane seasons are really a big kind of crapshoot for us every time during the hurricane season. The last one was the third most active year on record. We went through all the named storms for this season. It was the sixth consecutive above normal season. There were 21 named storms. And it was the seventh consecutive year with a named storm before June 1st, which means we're just getting more and more of these storms. And the number of what we call significant hurricanes are getting greater. So even with this storm system this last year, we didn't have it wasn't as bad as some other previous years we've had, especially here in the Virgin Islands. Luckily, we missed any major direct hits, but still across the country, there were some damages, over $70 billion in damages. Over 90% were from Hurricane Ida, which made landfall in Louisiana. But they're coming every year. And this upcoming summer will be a brand new hurricane season. We don't know what's in store, but we should certainly prepare for those. In addition, my colleague found some information from the World Economic Forum that discussed the impact of this current disaster of COVID-19 and estimated that if the world had prepared in advance and had done some things to prepare itself for it, that it would have cost about $39 billion in the world economy. But we were not really prepared for this. I don't know anyone really foresaw a pandemic coming. And so far, the losses stand at 11 trillion, which with a future loss estimated at 10 trillion in earnings. Now, again, these are kind of estimates from the World Economic Forum. There's lots of things that come into these numbers, but the point is that preparing for a disaster ahead of time can make a huge difference in your bottom line when it hits. If you can just take a little bit of time and energy to prepare ahead of time, it can make a big difference for you. And again, this other slide also emphasizes the impact of this current disaster. It ended up being the steepest economic downturn since the Great Depression for us. As you know, there were lockdown, there still are in so many ways, travel restrictions. It's a big impact to commerce and unemployment rates. GDP fell an annual rate of 31.4% in the second quarter of 2020, which was the largest quarterly decline on record. And then public funds. The US Treasury is now managing over $1 trillion in programs and tax credits to help businesses recover from this. But those are, we say those are the Treasury funds, but those are really still our funds. Those are our public funds that could have gone to other public programs had it not been for the disaster. So preparing is important. I'm going to talk about the elements of a preparedness plan. And these are just basic elements that everyone should have in place and have thought through in advance of any disaster, whether, of course, that's a hurricane, pandemic, a fire, or all sorts of things that we can't think of. It's important to have and establish a communications plan. How are you going to get in touch with your employees if cell phone towers are down, for instance, or you're not coming into work? How are you going to get in touch? How are you going to protect your documents? If you're holding them all in a work location and are all in paper documents in one site, is there a way that you can move some of those digitally, put them online, or have a backup copy in some flash drive or some other sort of source? You got to think of a way to protect your documents. Review your insurance coverage. Insurance can help, of course, in natural disasters, but it can also help in all sorts of disasters to make sure you help get through a period that you didn't foresee. Your supply chain, you should think about that. If you're the type of business that relies on the movement of goods and services coming into your store, or you exporting your product, you'll need to think about your supply chain, planning for an alternate location. If your specific location was knocked out, planning ahead would help you get back in business quickly. And then go over that plan and exercise it with your staff occasionally to make sure that you all are on the same page and understand what that plan is going to be. So a lot of businesses in a disaster really struggle. And it's been estimated by the Institute of Business and Home Safety that 25% of businesses do not open again after a disaster. And I can guarantee you a large percentage of that 25% did not have a disaster plan in place to help them get through it in the beginning. Now, it's possible that a disaster could wipe a business out even if they had a disaster plan in place, but certainly having that plan in place makes a difference up front and can mitigate the effects. Now, I'd mentioned before, one of the key components of a disaster plan is having insurance. And that makes a big difference for businesses. So we have some programs here at SBA, which I'll talk about here a little bit later on. But insurance is always your first option. And you want to make sure that you have sufficient insurance to get back in operation. I know a lot of people like to quote unquote self-insure because they don't like to pay the money to the insurance companies. And that in some respects can work and can be fine. But I have seen far too many businesses and homeowners who have said, well, they self-insure, but they don't actually self-insure. They're not actually taking that money that would go to an insurance company and putting that in a pot somewhere. They're just using that. And I understand that can be attractive and want to do, but it's important to have an insurance option. I always recommend having a legitimate insurance company because it may take years and years for you to build the amount of funds necessary to get through a disaster. Whereas if you have insurance, even though you may only have been paying in for a year, you can get that payout when the disaster strikes from the insurance company, as long as you have sufficiently covered yourself. So you should review your policies, make sure you understand what is and isn't covered, and consider business interruption insurance. So even without a hurricane, without a fire, without your typical kind of disasters that you think of in a pandemic, if you had a business interruption due to a pandemic, you could have an insurance payout that could help you get through a rough period without having to take on additional debt or lay off employees or be really stressed. Probably gonna be stressed anyway, but at least would lessen the stress during a pandemic if you had some insurance that could help. And it covers operating expenses in the event of a business shutdown, and business interruption insurance can also compensate your business for lost income. So you may be okay as a business and your facilities are okay and your inventory is okay, but if you're not getting the orders that you usually receive because of the pandemic striking elsewhere, that's where insurance or business interruption insurance can be a big benefit for you. Flood insurance coverage is important, and that's important nationally. Flood insurance or flood problems for a business are one of the biggest loss leaders when it comes to disasters. Most insurance policies don't cover flood insurance, so we have to think of an additional rider or some other type of insurance policy to get that coverage. And you can get more information on options that are out there at a website called floodsmart.gov. It gives a lot more information on flood insurance. So especially if you are in if your business is a type of business that's going to be in a flood zone, I want to absolutely make sure you have coverage of that type. So you want to talk about your facilities and operations. I know a lot of business owners operate at home these days, but many business owners have standalone locations. So you want to make sure that your space is assessed when you're thinking through your business plan and how you can stay in operation if it's not usable, or if it's been power's been cut off to it, or if phone lines are cut off to it. If you can't really use it, you need to think about all those different scenarios and to how you're going to keep your operation going, whether that's going to a new location, if that means just getting a generator or power's cut. But other things can happen. A fire can happen and can burn your business to the ground. Just look at here on St. Croix several years back, we had the tire company, H&H Tire. One night, the entire building burned down to the ground. And so he had to find another location pretty quickly just to stay in business. He was able to do that, but it was very costly to do. But it's very important to have thought through some of those things in advance to lessen the damage. I want to talk briefly about these resources here. One of the best resources that I know of is ready.gov. I'm going to see if I can visit that site just real quickly here in the email. I'd like to show some of the information that's on that site. Let's see if it'll allow us to go there. And if it doesn't, then we'll just move on. But I do want to say that at ready.gov, there is a lot of fantastic information there. There are templates that can help you plan. Okay, looks like we're going. Okay, so ready.gov. There's a lot of fantastic information here, talking about all sorts of disasters that you can think of. Of course, there's hurricane information here, but there's also tsunami, wildfires. It goes all the way to pandemic, nuclear explosions, floods. But there are lots of things that more impact us here more frequently in the territories. Earthquakes could happen as well. We've had slight tremors here, but nothing serious yet in the Virgin Islands, but it's not to say that it wouldn't happen.
Excuse me, Wayne.
Yes.
Can you do a new share so we can see that screen, please?
All right, so you're not seeing that? Let me
No.
see. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so I didn't share my screen. I just shared my slide. Let me know, Mary Jo, when you can see it.
We can see it now.
Okay, great. All right, so this is what that site looks like. Like I said, there's a lot of templates that are here available. You can get templates based upon the type of disaster that you're preparing for, whether that's fire, or whether it's severe weather or hurricane. There's a really good one. Let me see if I can find where that was. You'll find it under social media toolkits. So there's a lot of toolkits here that you can use. One was hurricane safety. I thought this was a really good one. There's a hurricane toolkit that you can get here. Lots of fantastic information on how to plan for insurance. Little templates you can do that you can use to plan and how you can assess your business's vulnerabilities for a hurricane. But really, this site has just a ton of fantastic information. Highly encourage you, when you start developing your business plan or your business recovery plan or preparation plan, visit this site, spend some time looking through it, and then download one of those templates, walk through some of the assessments for your business, and put that plan together. It really, it takes a little bit of time, but if you can dedicate a few hours to really sit down, think through your business critically, it can really pay off down the line if something happens. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation. All right, so back on that slide. So visit these when you can to prepare in advance for disaster. So I'm going to move on to the second section here, which is our recovery. I'm going to focus specifically on SBA's role in a disaster. I know others play significant roles, from here to the Coast Guard and FEMA and others, but I'm really only going to talk about SBA because that's our area of expertise. But we are part of a significant role of the recovery for communities in a disaster. Of course, we are the Small Business Administration, we are here to help business owners get up and running again quickly after a disaster, whether that be through technical support that they get from some of our resource partners, or actual direct lending assistance that they can get from SBA. We have a ton of programs around disaster assistance for business owners, but also we do assist business owners, especially in natural disasters. I'm sorry, I said business owners. We assist homeowners when it comes to natural disasters, but also private organizations, renters. There are many homeowners here in the Virgin Islands who received loans to help rebuild their homes after a disaster. Our loans in those instances typically come after FEMA has shown that either you're not eligible for FEMA assistance or some other grant money. Then loans can become available to help you, if you didn't insure properly, to help you rebuild your roof, or whatever it is to get back on your feet. It's important to recognize, though, that if you have received a disaster loan in the past and you did not carry insurance afterwards, or you canceled your insurance, that could jeopardize your ability to receive disaster loans for the same purpose again. So while SBA does provide loans to help people get back on their feet, it should not be considered an alternative to insurance. SBA is not supposed to be a large insurance company. It's supposed to be a temporary stopgap to help where there wasn't sufficient insurance in place. But you should have insurance in place going forward, especially if you've already received the loan once. You don't want to jeopardize your ability to receive it again. Now, SBA's role in these times can be found on our site. Of course, if you want to determine if there's a disaster declaration in your county, you can go to you can email disasterloan@sba.gov. But really, we push out that information. It's pretty clear when there's a disaster in place down here. When it comes to hurricanes and other natural disasters, SBA assistance cannot be made available until the president authorizes it for the area. And then it still can't be available until the governor formally requests it. So there's a process that happens in place, but as long as the president authorizes it and the governor requests it, then SBA can come in and provide its assistance. And that happens for every disaster that's been declared here, from Maria and Irma, but also the COVID-19 disaster, which is still in place, allowing us to offer a number of different programs, which I'll touch upon. As I mentioned, the main thing we do in all disasters is provide low interest disaster loans to help with not only businesses, but nonprofits, homeowners, and renters. And as I mentioned, it must be a presidentially declared declaration for individual assistance, which will be announced by us at SBA, but also FEMA. There are some times where an SBA administrative disaster can be declared, which is announced just by SBA. That has not happened here in the Virgin Islands in the years that I've been here, but it can happen in certain areas. Just to give you information to know that it can happen. The SBA can declare a certain area a disaster without FEMA doing it. If you want more information on FEMA's disaster declarations or SBA's, you can go to our websites, disasterassistance.gov or sba.gov disaster, and you can get a full list of all the disaster declarations that are out there. Of course, there's the COVID one, which is going on right now. There aren't any, there was a drought one last year for St. Thomas. And I believe a few weeks later, there was one issued for St. Croix. I don't think those are active right now. Of course, you'll find disaster declarations across the country for things like floods or wildfires or other issues. But here in the Virgin Islands right now, we only have the COVID-19 disaster in place right now. But again, hurricane season will come in another 6 months or so. So always more opportunities for more there. So in the process of applying for disaster assistance from SBA, although these are special funds that are eligible, and the requirements for these are greatly reduced when it comes to a comparison of regular loans. There are still some basic loan requirements for the loans. You must be able to have, show the eligibility, show that either your structure or somehow you were impacted by the disaster. So for instance, if you had a business that had already failed or was failing and then a hurricane hit, you would have to show that because of the hurricane is why the business failed or why something negatively impacted the business. If it was already damaged, that declaration of funds cannot necessarily be approved to help you get back on your feet if it was for another purpose. You have to have a basic credit history. If there's no credit history that's there, or if there is a very poor credit history, then a loan can be declined. Now, the credit scores that they use fluctuate depending on what's going on and what's allowed by Congress, and it can go pretty low. But if you have a strong history of not paying your bills, then your ability to get approved for an SBA disaster loan would be very difficult, especially if you have a history of defaulting on a federally subsidized loan or federally backed loan, guaranteed loan, then that would inhibit your ability to receive another loan from the federal government, whether it be SBA or anywhere else. And you must show the ability to repay the loans. So if your income that was shown over the years shows a very small amount, then you're going to get approved for a very small amount if you get approved at all. One of the things that I want to emphasize that I see sometimes here in the Virgin Islands is people will, there's sometimes a willingness to underreport your tax liability. So oftentimes there are some businesses who, even though they made, let's say, $100,000 during a year, a lot of that was cash, or a lot of that was in ways that aren't easily traceable. So they will report to the BIR that, or IRB, that the amount of revenue received was far less. They may say, well, I only, 2020 was a tough year. I actually made 100,000, but I'm only going to report 10,000 of it to show I didn't make that much and reduce my tax liability burden. And that may help you in taxes owed for that year. However, when it comes to receiving a loan from the federal government, we are going to take what was reported to the taxing authority. And the taxing authority says you earned $10,000 for the year, then that will be used as a formula to approve your loan. And it may be far less than what you really need and not enough for your actual business. So you want to make sure that you report honestly and accurately, because we use that information for determining the amount of an approval for a loan. And again, I want to put this up here as well. You're going to have to meet some basic credit underwriting standards for receiving a loan from SBA, just like you would with a bank, even though the standards are loosened somewhat for disaster loans. There's still those basic standards have to be in place. You have to have some basic credit for loans over $25,000. You're going to have to show ability to provide some collateral. You're going to have some sort of financial statements to provide. And you're just going to have to understand the conditions of the market and all these sorts of things for the loan, because we have underwriters too that have to meet some basic assurances that the loans will be paid back. Because again, these are not grants, these are loans that are used where public funds is being doled out and the public wants to have those funds returned. So for more information on the disaster information, you can contact sba.gov disaster, as I mentioned before. Once you receive a loan or you're starting that process, you can always contact our office, but really we have thousands of personnel in our disaster service centers that can answer your questions far more quickly than what we can here in the field offices. We often do not have the access to your data. We certainly cannot make the decisions on a loan. SBA does not allow any field personnel to make the decisions on loans in their area. They're made at service centers. And so you can contact those service centers through the 800 number or by emailing. Sometimes it's a long wait, but they typically do get to everybody. You can check on the status of an application, or if you just have some questions, you can call those numbers and get those done for you. So I'll provide, just as we wrap up, some information on our current disaster that we hopefully are wrapping up here and the impact here locally. You can see we have numbers here for both Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. I'm just going to focus on the Virgin Islands for this one. So we had a number of programs that were authorized by Congress, some that were brand new and didn't exist before COVID-19. One was PPP. We had almost 3,500 PPP loans in total that were approved here in the territory for a total value of a little over $202 million. That's a huge amount, considering that U.S. Census says there's only 2,500 businesses in the entire territory. The fact that we were able, in a combination of round one and round two, get a total of 3,430 PPP loans is huge. And it's important to also recognize that this was done, 95% of the loans for PPP were done by the territory's lenders. The territory lenders partnered with SBA to secure the guarantees for these loans and got those loans out quickly to the area businesses. And I want to say we have a really fantastic reach by our area lenders to operate this program and then process the forgiveness afterwards. While this was a loan program, this was a forgivable loan that could operate similarly to a grant. It just, each business had to prove that they used the funds for the purpose for which they were intended. And if they did that, then they can apply for forgiveness through their lender and get those loans forgiven. I don't know the exact percentage, but I know we're on target to have the vast majority of those loans. I know the vast majority have already been forgiven, but a very high percentage of them, I think it's approaching 90% in the territory, that have been completely forgiven for business owners. And when you look at the total number of $202 million that has been put here in the economy to help us stay afloat and keep people employed, that's a significant impact here in the territory. There were also idle loans and idle advances. Idle loans was an existing program, but it was modified somewhat for COVID. Here in the territory, we had 1,833 as of November 25th that have been approved for over $121 million here in the territory. That represents, when you look at it per capita or per business in the territory compared to any other territory or any other state in the country, we've had a far greater reach of this program. Far more businesses have been taking advantage of it. Again, it's just a loan. I do not expect them to be forgivable. However, they do have a 2-year deferment rate. And we have a lot of businesses that have been using this as a lifeline to get through a tough period, to help the businesses get back on track, and then we'll pay those loans off over the long term. There were 2 more programs that were implemented down here that Congress approved. One was the Restaurant Revitalization Fund program. Congress did not approve sufficient funds to help all restaurants out there, and the funds were quickly exhausted by applicants all across the country. The Virgin Islands was just like, it was just one big pot. There was no set amount that was allocated per territory or state. It was just everybody applying from all across the country. So we did have 28 restaurants here in the territory that did receive restaurant revitalization funds, and those were grants. Those were free dollars that went straight to restaurants, which were some of the hardest hit businesses because of the pandemic. Almost $6 million went out to territory restaurants to help them stay afloat, stay in business, keep people employed, and that was a successful reach by us. And then there were shuttered venue operators grants. There are not many large venue operators here in the territory, but there are some, and 2 did apply and receive a grant to help them stay afloat. These were another uniquely hard hit industry by the pandemic because essentially you can't congregate in large crowds during the height of the pandemic, and those businesses that relied on that just couldn't receive their income. So there were 2 grants that went out and 2 supplemental grants that went out after that, resulting in $227,851 to territory venue operators. And finally, I'd like to leave with, of course, there are lots of resources that we talked about in this. I think the ready.gov is really your best one to look at when preparing for a disaster. But you can always reach out to our resource partners. We have the SBDC, of course, hosting this. You have SCORE, which has a lot of great resources online. And we also have for veteran-owned businesses a VBOC, which is a Veterans Business Outreach Center, which offers a lot of similar information, whether it's before a disaster and you're trying to develop your preparation plan, or after a disaster and you're trying to work through how to recover, how to apply for the resources that are out there. These are excellent resources. They are, their full-time jobs are to help business owners prepare and recover from disasters, as well as a whole bunch of other things. So rely on them, make sure you make good use of them. They can be really helpful for you either before or after a disaster. And then here's our information. You can contact us anytime if you want to reach out to us. I'm on St. Croix, Lisa's on St. Thomas, but you can reach us on our office line or cell phone line. Highly encourage you to use email. We do get a lot of cell phone calls during the day. In fact, I've had 2 that have come in just during this presentation. So I'm not always able to answer the cell phone or get to your voicemail in a timely manner. But if you shoot me an email, I can get a written copy of what your question is. If I can refer you to someone else who can help, it's oftentimes a lot easier to do that through an email. So highly encourage you to use that if you need some assistance. Again, we cannot render decision on loans, but we can certainly answer questions and help if you're stuck in a program or a process with SBA and make sure you're routed to the right direction. So that's it. I'd like to just open it up now to any questions anyone has out there regarding how to prepare for a disaster or anything SBA, really.
Okay, great. Thank you, Wayne. If you guys want to answer online, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you. Okay, we will unmute you so that you can do that question live, or you can put your question in the chat. There's one question, Wayne. Any update regarding insurance companies covering pandemic related losses? Most insurance companies do not cover business interruption as a result of the pandemic.
I mean, not through us. Insurance companies don't really report to us on those types of how they structure their benefits or what they're offering. I think there was there was one for flood insurance, which was separate, but I would just work with your insurance provider here locally, no matter who that is, I would talk to them on what they can offer for a pandemic. Now, of course, it's hard for typically an insurance company will not write you a policy and cover damages for something that's already happening or has happened, such as the pandemic. But they can cover your losses from a certain point on, depending on what those are related to. But you'd have to talk to those insurance companies, and if they're not offering what you're looking for, see if there's some national resources, but I am not familiar with national resources.
Thank you. All right. Now, you in your presentation, you gave some of the reasons why businesses or why somebody might be denied a loan. And one of those that comes up often is when they owe the federal government, like maybe they're in arrears on child support or something like that, or default on their student loans.
Correct. Yeah, so certainly if you default on any federally guaranteed loan and just do not pay it, then you're not going to be able to get another federally guaranteed loan unless you're able to somehow resolve that default by paying it off and explain that away in some way. So that would be a problem. And Congress writes in a number of restrictions on federal funds. And so we don't make the rules, we just have to enforce them because that's what Congress says. And some of them are, if you are more than 60 days in arrears on paying your child support, the federal government will not provide you a loan in that instance. There are a number of different reasons. And of course, if you have poor credit, below a certain threshold, I think it's, if you're below like 580 now, then you won't be able to get a loan in that way as well.
Okay. There was a question, will a copy of the recording be emailed? The recording will be on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. A copy of the presentation will be emailed after the presentation. And also we will be sending out tomorrow an evaluation form. So if you could do the evaluation and return that to us as soon as possible, that would be fabulous. Okay, any more questions for Wayne at this point? And while you're thinking of them or writing them in the chat, I want to let you guys know that our very last presentation for the year will be on Thursday, and it is called Customer Service, the Importance of Soft Skills in the USVI. That will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday. You can register for that on our Facebook page, on our SBDC website. And the SBDC has so much more in store for US small businesses in our community. You can visit our website at www.visbdc.org. You can download the VISBDC app on your mobile device from the appropriate app store. You can like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Google My Business, and subscribe to the VISBDC YouTube channel for new uploads of our webinars on demand.
Mary Jo, it looks like we're going to be, well, wait, I think there's something else in chat here coming up. Someone has a question.
Okay, we will unmute we will unmute Amjad Awad, if I can find his name. Okay, Amjad
Hello.
Awad.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you, sir?
Good.
I appreciate all what you guys doing, and that's really helpful. I'm a business owner in St. Croix. I actually have two businesses under one corporation. My question to you is about the loan, the SBA loan that we got after the Hurricane Maria in St. Croix. And, you know, after that, I start paying off the loan. But since the pandemic hit and we got freeze up in this, but the interest is still counting on us. Is there any way that these loans could be waived if the reason of waiving them is that we bought merchandise, we approved this to SBA back then, but when the pandemic hit, we have a shelf time or a shelf life for our merchandise. And these merchandise are not valid to sell anymore. So because of the pandemic and being closing down and don't have enough people to work and all these issues. So there is any way possible, like how the SBA or let's say FEMA did with the government for the Virgin Islands, and they waive 300 million or something for the government from paying it. Is there is something, since we got hit pandemic after pandemic, meaning troubling or having hardship with after Hurricane Maria, and just we got stand up in our feet, and then we got hit with the pandemic with the help of SBA standing up in our feet, what I meant. So there is any direction you could direct us to do in this matter?
Yes and no. So I'll answer. So we cannot. So I saw where FEMA had waived some loan requirements for the territory, and they can do that, and Congress authorized them to do that. But I think there's two things in your question. One is you have your loan from Maria, and right now you're in a deferral period where you don't have to make any payments, but yes, interest is accruing over that time. But I believe it's not until 2022 they have to start making payments, but that is going to be coming up. We are not authorized to defer that any longer unless Congress allows us. So we have to let Congress decide that. Same with forgiving loans. I am not aware of any time in any part of the country that economic injury disaster loans were forgiven. And I know this has been a topic down here for a while for not only homeowners, but for business owners to have those loans forgiven for people in the territory. But again, SBA would not have the authority to independently just forgive those loans. That would have to come through Congress. So really the only way that this could happen is just be advocating through Stacey Plaskett's office. And she has been advocating for those things. She has been advocating to waive SBA loans that were granted during Hurricanes Irma and Maria. She's talked about it. And I know she's working on that, but you can give her more, just more fire by telling her, we need your help in forgiving these loans, and here are the reasons why. However, my experience tells me that I would not anticipate that's going to happen. I think the likelihood of that is very low, that they would be forgiven. So I would not anticipate that's going to happen. We might get an extension on deferrals, but right now we just don't have anything in writing, anything declared from Congress that that's going to happen right now. So not the best news, but I want to make sure you get the truth as we see it right now.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Okay, do we have any more questions for Wayne? Okay.
If not, Mary Jo, for wrapping up, I would just want to say two things just to everyone. If you only really get two things from this presentation on disaster assistance today, one is to visit ready.gov and spend some time reading through that site, taking their assessments on your business, thinking through some of the most likely disasters that could occur. I think that's the most valuable site in preparing a business for disaster, but not only a business, they have a lot of information on there for your home and thinking about your family and other things. It's just a fantastic site when it comes to preparing for the unexpected, preparing for disasters. Two, if there's another thing you can take away from that is make sure you lean on your resource partners, the SBDC, SCORE, VBOX, others. They are the local people here. They are well in tune with a lot of these disaster preparation materials. They're in tune with the federal government assistance programs that come down. Just make sure you're in touch with them as well. Those are really, if you do nothing but visit ready.gov and use that site and then stay in touch with the SBDC, you are heads and shoulders above any other business that's not doing that when it comes to a disaster. And then finally, I think this is maybe the last presentation that is hosted by SBDC. So I just want to say thank you for hosting so much during 2021. I hope all of you have a wonderful Christmas and New Year and holiday season with your families, and look forward to seeing you all again in 2022.
Great. Thank you, Wayne and Lisa, for being there for us. And on behalf of our state director, Mr. Ted Gutierrez, and our staff on St. Croix, St. Thomas, and our cadre of contractors, we want to thank all of you for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you on Thursday for the very last webinar for this calendar year. And we'll be back in January. We already have first webinar with SBA scheduled for January the 18th. So sign up for that on our Facebook or our website. And with that, we want to thank you all very much. Have a great day and a happy holiday season.
Thank you.